Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the second of today's talks as part of the German-Irish Vampire Festival. We're delighted to be joined by Professor Dieter Daniels, the critical theorist and professor from the Academy of Fine Arts, Leipzig. So Dieter will present a talk now on Media Undead. For those of you who are joining us live, you can contribute to the discussion by leaving your comment or question in the chat box, and we'll get to the Q&A section later. And so, yeah, without further ado, I will hand over to you, Dieter.
Yes, Candice, thanks.
Yeah.
Is the sound okay? My voice, it's fine? Yeah, okay, good, yeah. Yes, it was a pleasure to be in discussion with Candice and with the other people who are involved in the project since March already, so quite a while. And I was very impressed by the exhibition, which just opened the day before yesterday at the Silent Green, a very kind of location which has a lot of associations with the topics that I'm talking about. So the title of my talk is Media Undead, and I will share my screen now. And I hope that the title will be explaining by itself in the further course of what I'm going to tell you. I wasn't at all involved in any vampire issues before Candice gave me a call in March. And and during the process of discussing the artistic works that have been produced, discussing this talk with Candice and the other colleagues, it became more and more fascinating for me, the topic of vampires, I must admit. There is also a personal note to this. I will come back at it at the end, that I often spend my holidays in Wismar, which is one of the locations of the Nosferatu movie. But first of all, I would like to give you a short overview of some media theoretical issues related to the Bram Stoker novel and to Murnau's Nosferatu movie. In both the movie and in the novel, there are several media part of the plot. There are letters, because it's also an epistolary novel, and these letters also appear in the movie Nosferatu. There are newspapers, often excerpts, clippings, both in the movie and in the novel. And there are spiritistic, or what we also call telepathic media, connecting Dracula with Renfield and Minna Moreau. And there is shorthand, which Minna and Harker use to write their journals and letters to each other. Very prominent is a typewriter, which Minna uses to compile various documents in a coherent narrative. And finally, there is a phonograph, which Dr. Stewart uses in his diary and his medical practice. All these are typically late 19th century Victorian media devices, which are at the time kind of very cutting edge, so to say. And so it's of no wonder that several media theoreticians have been interested in these early technologies of transferring and of storing information, and have written several texts on these topics. If you're interested with more details, I can share the list, which I will go through with Candice, and she can send it to you. Let me start with Friedrich Kittler. He is maybe the most prominent German media theoretician. Yeah, I think most of my colleagues will agree. And he can be credited with initiating a media discourse on Stoker's novel. in his early text, because it's from 1982, so it's early in Kittler's career, he relates Bram Stoker's story to the contemporary late 19th century communications technologies, which I have mentioned already, such as the typewriter and the phonograph. And he also includes cinema, and cinema is not mentioned by Stoker, and it doesn't also appear in the movie. So the movie is a movie, but it doesn't talk about cinema. Already in 1982, Kittler sees these media as a premonition of digital technologies and as a kind of the new uncanny. I don't read all these quotes. You can read these quotes. Are they fine? Big enough? Yes? Okay. So, and in the second track of his argument, Kittler links Stoker's novel to the psychoanalytical theory and practice of Jacques Lacan on the occasion of Lacan's death. So Lacan may be called the undead of this seminal text. And Kittler refers to this in his own introduction, that he was just asked to give a short kind of contribution on the occasion of the death of Lacan, and that he came into a whole kind of new way of thinking about media, and that's he gave it the upcoming new kind of fears and hopes related to the Silicon Valley. It sounds a little bit weird, and the text is a little bit weird. Like some of the Kittler texts are kind of on the verge of rational and kind of sometimes a little bit fantastic elements. It's worth reading, and there is an English edition also, which I can recommend, which you can find online. Yeah. Okay, so far about the kind of initiator, Friedrich Kittler. And then we come to a couple of other texts on media related to the Stoker novel. There's a nice overview given by Leanne Page. And in her essay, she gives an overview of the technologies in Dracula and the relationship between individual and technological performance in the late 19th century. And she is arguing that Dracula represents not only both sides of the paradox of modernity, but technology epitomizes the scientific and rationale in terms of its capacity for high performance, but it is also disruptive and uncanny, as exemplified by the numerous failed performances of technology in the novel. And in her text, she refers to Leanne Page, phonograph, shorthand, typewriter, high performance technologies in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and a couple of other issues. She doesn't talk about Maria Parino. I found their text of Maria Parino specifically interesting for those who are in artistic practices with video and audio, because Maria Parino focuses especially on the sound recording technologies and doesn't so much tackle the shorthand, typewriter, and letter part. And in her text, she says that Stoker explores the material and immaterial features of voice, and does so by the phonographic recordings and by the shorthand, which brings the voice, so to say, on paper. Yeah. And it demonstrates how voices may produce an uncanny effect and raise the issue of what actually constitutes a voice. This is the reference for the Opala Parino text, sorry. Two more titles to give you an idea of the broad discussion given in academia, which I also found myself. Jennifer Wicke on vampiric typewriting, Dracula and its media, and David Punter, Bram Stoker's Dracula, tradition, technology, and modernity, which you can both find again in Leon Page's text, which is some kind of overview. Okay, this was a short tour d'horizon to give you an idea of the many writings which are already in the field of a kind of media theoretical approach to the novel and the movie we have as the most important parts of our symposium here. Now I come to my own ideas, which I want to propose, and which differ a little bit from those that I have introduced to you first. So what do I mean by undead media? Maybe first, before talking about undead media, we can talk about dead media. Dead media is a dead media project, was introduced by the science fiction writer Bruce Sterling in 1995. You can find the link here. And he, in 1995, at the height of the so-called digitalization, when the analog technologies were more and more disappearing and digital technologies took over all the old kind of analog features, he said, let's collect and make a compilation of obsolete and forgotten communication technologies. And he wrote a dead media manifesto. We need a book about the failures of media, the collapses of media, the supersessions of media, the strangulations of media, a book detailing all the freakish and hideous media mistakes that we should know now not to repeat, a book about the media that have died on the barbed wire of technological advance, media that didn't make it, martyred media, dead media, the handbook of dead media, a naturalist field guide for the communications paleontologist. So this is the start of the manifesto, and you can feel this kind of manifesto drive behind his kind of language. So what is this that I mean by undead media, comparing to what Bruce Sterling called the dead media? So for me, to differ undead media from dead media, I think old media don't die. They live on in new formats and recombinations. Second, time-based media, as film and audio recordings, are traces of undead bodies, voices, and movements. And third, digital media are our contemporary form of being undead. So first, old media don't die. They live on in new formats and recombinations. Marshall McLuhan is the one who can be credited of initiating this idea of the kind of eternal life of dead and undead media. And he also was an important inspiration for Friedrich Kittler. So in one of his TV appearances, that's him here, McLuhan says, movies tend to be the content of TV as books used to be the content, novels used to be the content of movies. And so every time a new medium arrives, the old medium is the content and it's highly observable, highly noticeable. But the real roughing up and massaging is done by the new medium and it is ignored. So this is spoken word, which is I have transcribed. So it's not written word. You feel his kind of typical McLuhan rhetoric, who makes up his ideas while he's talking. I go more into depth with McLuhan's idea of the ongoing life of media in this text, which you can find with this link, which I can maybe share in the chat if you want. Where is the chat? Now, while I'm sharing the screen, I don't know where the chat is. I do that after. Oh, here's the chat. Okay. Okay. So you get an idea of my normal media theoretical work when I'm not dealing with vampires. And you also have this quote of McLuhan from the TV appearance. And it is used in an interesting way by Namjoon Paik. The essay which I've just posted is by Paik, because Paik is remediating McLuhan's TV appearance in a kind of video experiment on the screen is distorting his face with a magnet and lets McLuhan talk while being distorted. Yeah. So in a way, Pike takes up this idea of this remediation, that how it is called in contemporary terms, that McLuhan initiated, and he remediates McLuhan, talking about remediation from video to from television to the then new medium of video. It was in the 60s when video still was a young medium. Okay. So far about why old media don't die, but live on in new forms and recombinations, or what we call remediations. Okay. So my second point is time-based media, as film and audio recordings are traces of undead bodies, voices, and movements. So this is not absolutely new, and in the quotes from other media theoreticians, which I presented to you in the first part of my talk, you had already some similar ideas. But I think we can go back to the very source, to the very beginning of audio recordings, because Thomas Alva Edison, the notorious inventor, who was also, besides many other inventions, the inventor of the phonograph, he kind of invented the phonograph without having a specific purpose in mind. He invented it, so to say, by chance, while he was researching for something else, for kind of telegraphy solutions, for a quicker way of sending telegraphy signals, and came up finally with the phonograph, which he didn't research. There is a lot of these kind of accidental inventions in technology and also in science, where people happen to find something that they weren't looking for. And sometimes they even get the Nobel Prize for these findings. So when Edison had the phonograph at his disposition, he said, okay, now I can suddenly record voices or sounds and replay them. But what are the possible applications for this invention, which I just had? Nobody was waiting for this invention. Nobody had ever thought about time being repeatable. It's the first time in history that time, the flow of time can be stored and can be restarted from the beginning of the stored moment and played again. It's before moving pictures, you know. So one of the many applications he thought, one of them is recording voices for deceased persons for the legacy of, for example, politicians or poets or other figures of prominence. So that is one of the possible applications that Alva Edison put out in an interview after he was presenting the phonograph for possible commercial productions. And following on Edison's kind of posthumous published diary and sundry observations, Philippe Badouin, the editor of the French version, points out that Edison even imagined being able to record the voice of another being to be able to make audible, which isn't the voice of the dead. He kept that in his diary only during his lifetime, but after Edison was dead himself, the undead notes of his diary were published, and it turned out that he had this kind of strange idea, which again brings us back to this topic of the telepathic or spiritistic media, which also often pretend that they connect us with the dead. Now I want to bring your attention to another novel, which is, I think, as elaborate as Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, and interestingly, almost contemporary. It is published exactly 1 year before Bram Stoker's Dracula, Bram Stoker is 1887, and Villiers de l'Isle-Adam, who has the full name of Philippe Auguste Comte Villiers de l'Isle-Adam, published his novel Eve Future in 1886. It is also a 19th century fiction novel, and in this novel, Thomas Edison is one of the main protagonists. In the novel, the term android is maybe used for the first time in a larger context, and in this way it popularized, or it was an important part of popularizing the term of android. So the Eve Future, Eve of the future, is a kind of cyborg, and its movements and its voice are based on phonogram recordings. So it's a kind of pre-programmed robot which can speak and talk, and all the information that runs the robot is pre-recorded on phonographs which are hidden in his chest. Yeah. So you see that this undead idea of a cyborg is close to the undeadness of the Dracula, and that both are dealing with the phonographic recordings in one way or another. And it's surprising that not much research has been done, evidently, on the surprising parallels of these two texts. And here are the covers of the two novels, first edition, which cost a fortune by now. You know, it's more than 12,000, 13,000 euro. If you find one of them, keep it. I found basically only one interesting essay, which is by Nicole Catherine Lobe. And she writes in her master's thesis, while there are no known personal connections between Bram Stoker and Villiers de l'Isle-Adam, an examination of Dracula with Le Futur reveals similarities in the author's treatment of orality, literacy, and the phonograph as the site of conflict between the oral and literate networks. The F of the Future and Dracula expose the phonograph to be a meeting point between humans and machines, mortality and immortality, speech and print. Stoker and Villiers create a close alignment between the phonograph and the female body, human and android, as vehicles to be filled with informations and vibrations. The outcome of filling the female body and the phonograph, however, is a collapse of the oral networks in both novels. So it seems there is more work to be done in the relation of these two authors who are contemporaries without knowing about each other. So far about sound recordings, but what is about visual technologies, about optical media? It's interesting that neither Stoker nor Murnau do mention photography or any kind of moving images, cinematography or film. And cinema started around 1895, that is exactly 2 years before Dracula was published. So the movie and the novel are contemporaries, but they don't interfere at the moment that Bram Stoker is writing his novel. He doesn't still relate it to film and cinema. But I think from today's point of view, these moving image technologies are the one that create the paradox of the visual undead. The novel and its author kind of have faded away. If you ask anybody on the street, so to say, do you know about Bram Stoker? There's a huge chance that people will say, no, never heard about it. But if you ask him, do you know about Dracula? I'm sure that almost 100% of the people will say, yes, sure, I know Dracula. And so it's interesting that the film Nosferatu and the novel by Stoker have all been kind of moved in the background compared to the hero, which they are promoting, the vampire. And he is since then resurrected over and over again in movies. Some of them you have in this wonderful German-Irish vampire festival ongoing in the Movimento cinema, but you have it also in video games and in virtual environments like the one created in the exhibition at the Silent Green. So to say, Dracula kind of has become the undead of the screen. That is my argument. And it's linked to some similar but different argument made by Kittler. So we had now the two questions, time-based media and audio recordings as traces of undead bodies, voices, and movements. We had the old media don't die, they live on in new formats and recombinations and remediations. And now I'm coming to the close with digital media are our contemporary form of being undead. I just touch on this very quickly. This would be something worth having a whole discussion in its own right. Just to give you a glimpse of what my ideas are, I think from today's media archaeological point of view, we can relate what the undead in the Victorian time of the novel were with digital media developments. An ongoing question, for example, is how to deal with social media accounts of deceased persons. Who has access? Does anybody have your keyword in case, or should they be kept alive, so to say? Or should they be deleted? And if they are alive, who is in charge? And who will answer any requests, and who will, in case it's something like website, not a social media account, who will kind of do the maintenance and pay the bills, you know? Okay, so I think these are points for discussion. So far, I made it in half an hour, like Candice wanted me to do. Thanks so far, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dieter. Yeah, so God, there's so much on my mind now that gave me so much to think about. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please add them to the chat there. One thing that came to my mind there is sort of the overtaking of oral tradition of folk stories with, you know, the written, obviously writing novels, and then films, and of course radio, and how, sorry, I actually accidentally sent a direct message. I didn't mean to, just to say, leave your comments and questions in the chat. So, sorry, I'll start that again. Yeah, what came to mind is the overtaking of media from the oral tradition of folk stories, and how, in a sense, that kind of like the remixing of a story and the retelling, how every time it changes and it sort of adapts and becomes in itself a kind of living thing. The story gets life, and that's something that's really quite special about the vampire, about Dracula, how it's been retold in so many different ways. And this was sort of the seed of the idea of the festival, was how, you know, Murnau retold the story of Dracula in the form of Nosferatu. Herzog retold that Nosferatu again in his own way. And now there's a new version of Nosferatu currently in production. You know, and what's the sort of the impetus of someone to say, I love that story, but I'm going to do another version. You know, there's always something to add. It's almost a genetic, it's almost this kind of reproduction, sense of reproduction. And it's that kind of, I guess, a meme.
It's a meme. Yeah, that's a nice idea. Yeah, a meme is a very good idea for comparing the media undead, what I was talking about. Yeah. Because also a meme never has an author, you know?
Yeah.
Because Dracula has almost become a kind of authorless figure. You know, most people who know about Dracula will never be referencing it with Bram Stoker, who initiated it. You know, that the name is much more prominent than the original novel by now. You know, so and this is typical of a kind of meme thing. Normally people they know the meme but they don't know where it comes from, you know. So, and this is a kind of being undead, because once you are without the author, you don't die with this author. When the author dies, he takes many of his inventions with him, but the meme goes on when the author is gone, you know. So it was a good idea to call it a meme. Yeah. And then
Thanks. So yeah, what other things then? I was thinking that there's also this sort of like idea of the kind of hauntology, the sort of, you know, the mirror, the endless mirrors of the kind of like funhouse or something, and the reverberation of that. And I guess that sort of reflects as well. It's kind of kept youthful because it always reflects the current time as well. But very interesting that Stoker never referenced film, and I can only imagine at that time how exciting it would have been. You know, it would have really been an absolutely magical thing to witness film.
Maybe it was just too short, you know, because it was just 2 years, and while he was writing, cinema was still not really visible, you know. It was like the first attempts, and maybe he didn't know about it, you know. So
he was working in theater. I don't know. I would have imagined he would, like, it must have been a buzz, and especially in that field where it could be, well, maybe they wouldn't have even seen it as a sort of threat that it might have come to be in the 20s when the cinemas were
could be, yeah.
So does anybody in the audience have anything to ask or suggest?
Just one word to you. Hauntology also is a wonderful word. I'm just taking notes, you know. I should have come up with this, because maybe my talk is a little bit about which different ways of media ontologies as hauntologies, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm excited that you're delving deeper into the subject, Dieter.
Absolutely, yeah. You gave me this kind of thing, and when you called me first, I thought Nosferatu. I never was very interested in that stuff. So, but then it turned out it was absolutely perfect, you know. So,
and just for those who might not have caught at the beginning of Dieter's talk, he referenced the Dead exhibition, Dead, a Set of Teeth, which is happening as part of the German-Irish Vampire Festival up in Silent Green in Transmedial Studio. This is part of a program that the embassy has been running in partnership with the Goethe Institute Irland, where we've brought students and recent alumni from 6 universities in Ireland and Germany. They're artists, young emerging artists who are working collaboratively together, and the exhibition is on currently, and it's absolutely brilliant. There's so much, I mean, the standard is fantastic in any way, but so many different kind of approaches to the theme of the vampire. Really, really excellent work. So highly recommend that you check it out before it closes Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. So there's a couple of comments and questions.
Okay.
Amy asks, I don't know how much this is connected, but during your talk, the idea of authenticity came to mind. How would you see authenticity in this context? Really good question.
Authenticity, yeah. I don't have like an easy answer, you know, but I think the last point, which for me is the most interesting to develop the question in how far digital media are our contemporary form of being undead, that would be maybe the way to question what we call today authenticity, because you know that the appearance of persons in social media is pretending to be authentic, but it's not at all. The whole discussion about filters and about the relation to the new ideas of beauty and the body, which is always kind of spooky and a little bit scary for me, that people really try to look like in real life how filters make them on social media, and that this is not very healthy sometimes. And I mean, all the examples I had are from fiction, but once we are in the realm of social media and digital personalization identifications, the moment of fiction authenticity becomes unclear. That would be something to be discussed in detail more than I can hear. Oh, they're coming up many more questions. I don't know if that was an answer. I don't have a clearer answer than that by now, I must admit. Yeah.
So Daniel says early film was a singular experience too, so only one person could look into the scope, which is a really
very early one. Yes. Like you had like a Google lens in your.
Yeah. So it wouldn't have been very comparable, I imagine, then to theater, or I mean,
but when I said in 1885, this was the first projections by the Lumiere brothers and also by Edison. Edison invented the phonograph and the cinematograph, and they used it also for projections by them. Before 1885, it was only for one person to be looked at. That's true. Yeah.
So Lena asks, is it possible for parallels to be drawn with Stoker's novel, The Lady of the Shroud?
I'm not sure if I'm very good in knowing what The Lady of the Shroud is about. Can anybody help me?
Well, maybe Lena is suggesting that this is further reading for us all to make that connection. So I've shared the link to the exhibition. There's the information is all in the festival program. It's on in Transmedial Studio in Silent Green in Berlin from 10 until 6 every day.
If there are no more questions, I still have a bonus track if you want.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Well, why don't you go for the bonus track, and we still have time if a question comes in.
It's quick, And,
yeah.
Okay. I mentioned that I'm a big fan of the town of Wismar, and I promised in the beginning that I will come back to that, And this is a bonus track. It's not that much theoretical, it's more anecdotal. And so in Murnau's Nosferatu, the town of Wismar is one of the locations where the film was shot. In the film, it's called Wisborg instead of Wismar, but who knows the place and who knows the town will immediately make these connections. The ship of Nosferatu arrives in the port of Wismar, and there are two locations in town. And it's interesting that Wismar is one of the rare German towns which has almost remained unchanged during the last 100 years. And, and these locations can still be visited. One is the Holy Geist, Holy Spirit Church and Cloister in Wismar. And here you see at the beginning of the movie where the young man is getting on the horse to travel to the Dracula castle, because he wants to buy this strange building, and his job is to go there and make the contract arrangements. And at the end of the movie, there's one of these famous night scenes, again, the same locations, the Heilig Geist Cloister, where you see him with one of his coffins, where he has his earth of his homeland, which he needs to lay down and during the day. not to be seen by sunlight. And when I was in Wismar, I took this photo. You see that it is more or less unchanged. Hoppala, sorry. This is the location which you see up here. Yeah, very much the same. This is the pathway here, which you see here, where the young man is going through with his horse. And these are kind of tourist locations. And for the year 2022, there were special Nosferatu tours in Wismar, where you could have guided tours across town, seeing these locations. Now there is an interesting add-on that this is the door or the porch of the cloister, which you see here or here, where the young man will go through with the horse. And this porch is used for another TV series for the so-called Soko Wismar. And in the Soko Wismar, you see there just add this sign, police, here. And then you have the police cars of Soko Wismar going in and out of this cloister porch. And for the year 2022, Soko Wismar is a kind of normal crime serial of German TV, very popular stuff, you know. They have a special issue, Fight of the Vampires, Kampf der Vampire, a special Nosferatu edition. It's the story is like a typical simple story of one of these Soko police place. There is a stage play taking place in Wismar on one of the original locations of Murnau's film, which is another church, St. Georgen. And the main Nosferatu actor is found dead on the morning of the premiere. And in one way or another, the vampire comes back and hunts the police inspector. Okay, you can still find that in the Mediathek and look it up if you feel like. At the premiere of the TV series now, it is interesting, they do the premiere of the TV series in one of the locations of Murnau's film, which is St. Georgen. And there the actors, for example, the police inspector and the TV public finally meet, because most of the actors don't live in Wismar. Wismar is a very small town. They all only come from Berlin when they have to be in front of the camera. So they are not very much seen in private life or in real in Wismar. And they had the premiere, and this is the moment when the people on the screen and before the screen first time meet in real. And I will share with you this little video. And just to explain to you, this is the location. You see here the St. Georgen. Inside is this video scene happening, and this is the kind of cutout of the moment where Nosferatu is carrying his coffin across the porch of St. Georgen. And I think I will not look with you because it's all in German, the little scene that I'm posting, but I just ask you to look at it yourself, and you will enjoy the meeting of the undead and the and the living from the screen and behind the screen. And this is my finale for today. Inside of St. Georgen, I was always, long before Candice gave me the call, fascinated by this gravestone. It's a gravestone of a sailor, and what it says is, Christus ist mein Lebend, sterbend ist mein Gewinn. Ich mut mich ergeben, mit Freuden fahr ich dahin. My kind of vague translation of this very kind of strange spelling is, Jesus Christ is my life, dying is my benefit. I have to surrender and with joy, I go where I have to, you know. I was always fascinated by this kind of way of dealing with the dead. So that was the bonus track. As I promised, more anecdotically and through my special fascination with the location of Wismar. And with this grave, which I always, each time I go there, I take a photo of this grave. And the ship is very similar to the one which Nosferatu has when he comes into the harbor.
That's really, really great, Dieter. Thank you. It just brought something to mind as this sort of, you know, idea of if you don't have a photo, it didn't exist. You know, this.
Yeah.
People sort of constantly taking selfies as a sort of, I don't know. I mean, my kind of pavement psychology degree. Would I'd sort of say that it's that kind of like insecurity of existence, or sort of you know, this song, people take photos of each other just to know they existed. Is that the words?
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
So kind of made me think again about this idea of the sort of media undead, and then, like, you know, further ideas of sort of like really, you know, kind of mattering more, or feeling the kind of value of fame, or being kind of more prominent through more media, and that it somehow makes you exist more, you know, even beyond death. So, you know, it's obviously like now we have media of so many billions of people around the world, and it will exist somehow in some cloud until it doesn't. And we also don't know when these clouds will sort of like just decide to close, you know?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting talk, Dieter. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yes, and sorry for not answering all questions. I know now that Lady of the Shroud is another novel of Bram Stoker, but I said in the beginning, I just dipped into Bram Stoker for the occasion.
No problem at all,
Okay,
Dieter. No, Lena followed up just to say that she suggests it for further reading and debate, and that's, I mean, I think it's really great for people to get involved in the discourse and suggest further reading. Fantastic.
Perfect. Yes, great. Yeah.
So that is the second talk of today's series of talks. Thank you so much, Dieter Daniels.
Great.
Next up, we have Madeleine Potter, who will talk about the Banshee and Carmilla, or the roots of Carmilla being in Irish folklore. So hope to see you again there. And indeed for the rest of the German-Irish Vampire Festival. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks, Candice, for bringing me into this topic. Right.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.